We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast. This week, how about a look like way behind the curtain? Backstage, where all the hard work is getting done to create something on stage that somehow looks like magic. Flowing, authentic, effortless. Today's episode of the Mankind Podcast is a recent keynote conversation from the Mankind Project USA's iGroup Summit. What's an iGroup? I'll come back to that. I got the rare opportunity to talk with a master, Jim Mitchell. Jim's a coach and a facilitator who's been working with leaders and leadership teams for over 2 decades, creating spaces for transformative growth and collaboration, and he makes it look easy. He's also one of the men who built the foundation for much of the men's group work that happens in the Mankind Project. We call our men's groups integration groups, iGroups. He helped literally write the book for men's groups and was instrumental in creating a generation of men's groups leaders and training leaders in the Mankind Project. Jim takes us on an inspirational journey of creating spaces for men's transformational work. From the definition of transformation, like what is transformative space, ways of opening the window of transformation, what can get in the way of transformation, and what it takes to keep it going. What looks easy isn't. This whole conversation is an invitation to courage. It's a call for each of us to do our individual work and to come together and create an alignment of the spirit, head, heart, and soul in everyone we're working with. If you're in any kind of transformational community, you will find value in this conversation. Bring it to your men's group, bring it to any group where you're consciously creating a container for what we call work. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Gozo said, "When you meet a Zen master on the road, you cannot talk to him. You cannot face him with silence. What are you going to do? Meeting a Zen master on the road, face him neither with words nor silence. Give him an uppercut, and you will be called one who understands Zen." I'm in the room right now with one who understands Zen and has been giving uppercuts to men's personal development for decades and decades. And when I emailed Jim to ask him if he would grace us with his presence today, he said yes. And why I wanted to call Jim is because I've been thinking about this idea of creating spaces for transformative connection. And one of the men in my life who has taught me about that is this man, Jim Mitchell. Jim was originally a creator of the original iGroup leadership training. And there is actually audio floating around out there that you can go and find and listen to. And so we're going to have kind of a podcasty conversation today. I'm going to ask some questions, and I'm just going to wind him up and let him do his thing. Let him bring his brilliance. So first of all, Jim, welcome. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and give a little bit of your CV for the folks in the room who might not know you.
Sure. Thanks for the invitation. Jim Mitchell, Thunder, October 1993, Mount Lemmon, Tucson, Arizona. So next year will be my 30th anniversary. Came into the work trying to save myself more than anything else. I had screwed up my marriage royally. That cost me my daughter when she was 10 months old. And I looked around and, like many of us, made that declaration that there's something really fucked up in my life, and I think it's me. And so that set me out on a path. I found New Warriors a couple of years after that. In New Warriors, I've been a co-leader, a full leader. I've led 100 or so trainings. I was the last worldwide I group chair. In the process, as Boyson mentioned, decided that, you know what, we haven't updated I group protocols in decades, and so why don't we upgrade this? Because I'm a big believer that men can only get so far just talking about their feelings. That's an important thing that we do to get men to talk about feelings and come out of numbness, but you can only get so far with that. So what is the next level skills that we actually have to learn to be mature and responsible men in the world? And it's feelings is just a part of that. So redid the I group protocols, started a bunch of new stuff. I don't know what's happening with that since then. Was the vice chair of the organization worldwide, and was the last chair of the worldwide organization as well. So I have a few fingerprints all over this organization. Been inactive the last 10 years or so, mostly just focusing on how do I take transformation out into the world. So how do I do that in corporations and with groups of leaders and others who also need to be more aware of how to transform themselves if they, to just be better corporate citizens and better humans. So that's kind of it. My voice is a little bit shot. Let me just give you a heads up. I did 2 full days of stand-up facilitation work in Boston this past week, and so I barbecued my voice. So I have some hot green tea here. We'll see if that gets me through this. So that's kind of who I is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also know, because I know lots of people, that Jim sits in a couple of circles of guys that he meets with every month or every couple of months. So he's still putting fingerprints on the organization in different ways, in different capacities. So first thing, Jim, what we're talking about, I brought you this. I had the title already in my head, and I came to you and I said, if I started a conversation like creating space for transformative connection, the first thing you said, well, what's transformation?
Yeah.
And you said, oh yeah. So let's start there. What's transformation?
And so I think there's a lot of ways to look at that, but I think there's a little precursor here. And that is, if this group is really, really about I-group facilitation and understanding, how do we actually facilitate that process brilliantly so the next man can continue to transform his life? I do think we have to know what that is. So what is the operational, what is some operational definition of transformation? We have a lot of jargon in New Warriors, and one of the things I, built into the I-group protocols was something I called the jargon harangue, for any of you that have heard those CDs he was talking about. But it was about understanding that we got to define this stuff. We just can't have fancy words and that we think sound, kind of highfalutin or something and special. We got to actually understand what those words do. So I sat down a couple of years ago and started looking at, well, what's transformation, whether we're doing it in Warriors or anywhere else. And so can I just, I don't know how much time we have, so you're going to have to help me with that.
We have till the top of the hour. We have till
the top of the hour. That's
Yep.
Not near enough time. I generally need like several days to go into this stuff. So
that's right.
We're going to do the best we can. Let me just share something with the group here, though. We have been sitting with different forces acting on us, head, heart, soul, spirit, but they've been acting kind of independently. And every now and then whacking up against each other, and maybe we get a little hit out of that, but mostly not enough of a hit to actually move us forward. Just an awareness that that part of my life, whatever that event or incident or scenario is still inside of me, still unresolved. And so there is a moment in I-groups and in other transformational spaces that some of you and I am involved in where all of a sudden, for a variety of reasons, it is the time for those 3 or 4 things that were previously unaligned to align themselves. And they align themselves in such a way that there is a transference across all of those realities inside of us that happens just in a nanosecond. And the transference is about, what does my head get about this place in my life? So what does my logic and reason tell me about this place in my life? Let's say it's a place where I haven't been thriving much, or I've been struggling in relationships, or struggling with parenting my children in a healthy and effective way. So all of a sudden, my logic brain gets that. My heart and all of those feelings kind of get that place that says, I have all these feelings about that part of my life not working well. and not working at all, or misfunctioning and misfiring a lot. There's also a place where, the work of the spirit, which I think is kind of the aspirational work that we do. I'm not religious, so it's not spirit in that sense, but the spirit in the sense of aspirational, the hope that we have for ourselves. And then the work of the soul, where we carry this kind of human journey we're on. All of those things all of a sudden just kind of become best friends inside of us. And that is the moment that what I call a transformational window opens up. So those things have aligned. They actually have communicated and become more of a cohesive state inside of me. And there's a place then we sense that shift, that something is happening in me. And what happens in that transformational window is this. Our awareness shifts to a place that says, in the very deep psyche, where all of a sudden we can see forward and backwards at the same time with a great deal of clarity. The backward looking piece is, let's say, looking at this relationship with my dad and how it's never functioned in my life, and how low functioning it is, and how I long for and hunger for a different level of relating to him or to my mom or whoever it is. And I'll have all this sadness and this guilt and this disappointment and all kinds of feelings, maybe a bit of shame and stuff about how that relationship is and how it's just never have seen it got better. I see that. And then I also see at the same time, of course, that's the forward-looking piece, which is my visioning into what my life will look like if I continue down this path with this person or in this scenario. So that becomes crystal clear that I am paying a hell of a price for how this thing is. I've been paying that price for way too long. And now I see real clearly that if I continue this, 5, 10, 15 years, how much more misery I'm going to be in. When those two things happen, where I can have that forward look and backward look after those four parts of me have aligned, it really begins then to throw me into the transformational portal, as I call it. And what happens then is that place where I do get to now look at, am I willing to engage in all the necessary growth, learning, and evolution and wisdom making that I have to do in order to move through this? Because now I can see that the current path projected out in front of me still brings me way too much misery, way too much low energy, way too much disconnect from people and myself. What we see at that same time when we're forward looking is the shadow or the figment of an alternative path. It's not fully defined yet. A lot of it is unknown because it means, but we see the hope of that alternative path that says, maybe there is a way for me to go forward differently in relationship with myself, in relationship with my dad or my son or whoever it is. And I don't know what it all is, and I can't see all that it's going to take to get there, but I do see that shadowy kind of ghost apparition of a second path beginning to show up. And as I see that, then there is a bit of hope that arises where we're in that transformational window. And the hope is, if I can do the work and get supported to do the work on me necessary, I can abandon this current path that just takes me into more misery, and I can move myself to this other path that takes me into hope and change and evolution. Again, not the promise of comfort, not the promise that it's going to be easy to get there, but something that I know will be much better than to continue on this path that I own. And so that happens in iGroup a lot when we do iGroups well. When we have really good, men sitting there, hearts and souls, and are curious about asking the right questions when the time is for that, and really helping a man see that secondary path show up. Now, to actually get started on that path, in other words, to begin to move through the portal into that new life, I actually have to find a lot of things, one of them being courage. I got to find the courage to actually face and embrace and brace up to whatever is on that new path that is part of me continuing to shed my current skin, my current way of being, and grow the next new me to be in healthier relationships with myself and others. we can't give a man courage. That's the sad part, is we can't input courage into the man to actually start down that new path. All we can do is help him see that the path is open, and we can support and encourage and bless and all of those things. But it really, to take that first step through that transformational portal before it closes, because it will close, to take that first step, a man has to decide that I'm done. I've had enough of the old life. No matter what's down this new path, it's going to be better than how this relationship currently is with that person or with myself. And so as he stands there, what he's trying to find is courage now, because it's about going into the wilderness for a while, going into the big unknown. And we as humans don't like that. And so to be willing to go into that unknown place without knowing what the outcome is going to be with certainty scares a lot of us as humans, and especially scares us as men. We like certainty and outcome, a lot of us. Now, here's the danger part. So while the man is on the brink of that and all of this stuff is moving inside of him, that window will start to close if he's not careful. And you've seen this in iGroup, where a man approaches that transformative window and that portal that starts to open that new path, and he just kind of gets stuck and scared, and he just stares at it a lot, and he balks and he coughs and burps and farts, and he can't move forward. And we've all seen this. If you're in a powerful iGroup at all, you've seen men hit that kind of stall place, where 3 cylinders on the engine just went out. And a lot of that is the ego showing back up. A lot of that is fear taking over the transformation and saying, you know what you have right now is better than going down that path where you don't know what the fuck is down there. And so that stalling is the place where in iGroups, we also have to then use what I think is still one of the best questions that we've ever come up with in this work. And that's what's at risk. That's the question of, if it's Tom doing the work, it's Tom. So you've been kind of just kind of sitting there for a while. What's at risk for you to go down this new path? What's at risk for you to change this part of your life, or this part of your relationship with yourself, or this part of your relationship with dad? And more importantly, we have to be able to use that horned paradox of what's at risk if you don't do this, Tom. And to help a man get brilliantly stark clear about both sides of that kind of walk down through levels of truth on both sides of that horn dilemma, so that he can truly see that his being stuck is not going to save him. His being stuck basically means that the transformational window closes inside of him. Those things disconnect from each other inside of him, and he settles back into the old path again because it is known and familiar. And you've all seen that happen with people. Part of it with being really good at getting him to see the risk point of him not only doing this thing that he's got to do to evolve himself, but what's at risk if he doesn't. And in that doing, helping him see that he does have the courage he needs. I think sometimes our job is to remind men that they were born with courage. You don't get to do this human thing without courage. And so that place where we've all demonstrated courage at various levels our entire lives. And we have to remind him that that's a hardcore, almost archetypal energy in him, is to find his courage to open up this new path before the window completely shuts. And then he's got to know that he's not alone there. So I kind of see transformation that way. But again, I look at this stuff from the standpoint, Boyce, and as you well know, is I'm just, again, not willing to throw this word around. I want to know what are all of the energies and vibrations and modalities and realities that are in place, because if I'm going to be wizard in iGroup for that man, I have to know what the fuck I'm playing with. And I have to know where it takes me. And I have to know, can I support him moving toward that transformational portal without pushing him, without trying to do the work for him, because that's not how it works. You got to be a volunteer. Transformation means I am volunteering to go into this comfort of change. And so I do need some help and I need some support, but none of these men in my I group or in my men's circle, whatever it is, none of them can do this work for me. I have to go through that door that's marked transformation and new future. And unless I find the courage to do that, then the door shuts. And then I end up by default back on the old path with more misery coming my way pretty immediately. So that's kind of my long ass definition of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me. So.
Thank you, Jim. Yes. So here we are. So there's a definition of transformation. So if we could reconstruct that, we would go back to the head, the heart, the spirit, the soul aligning to create a shadow of something that opens this transformational space, the courage to step up to it, the courage to see a possible future that's different than the possible path, an inkling of what that path might look like, and the courage to continue moving down it.
Exactly. And that then I got to do what is one of the hardest things for all of us is I have to now volunteer for the hard work of changing my life. And that's where a lot of men also balk, is that they see what they got to do. They don't want their current life, but they see the hard work, the hard emotional, spiritual, soulful work that's in front of them. And again, they can balk at that.
So I'm going to make an assumption about a lot of you men in the container here that are listening to this, that my hands up for creating those kinds of spaces for other men. Yeah, my hands up. So now let's take it into kind of a transformative space, right? So you framed transformation for the individual. I have to volunteer. I have to be willing to step up. How can now I, as a magician in an I group, as a guy who's helping to create these containers, create that space?
Well, some of it, I mean, I think that happens on a number of levels. So one of the things that adds to, let's talk about the additive parts of the space. One of the things that adds to the space is, are the other men in the I group also been men of courage during their own evolution? Because to the extent that that container is not composed of men all at different places in their own journey, but all finding the courage to evolve, then we got kind of a glitch in the vibration of the space, not in a bad way. And men, again, come in at different places, but hopefully wherever their starting point is, that they have been in I group moving from that point forward in their lives. My starting point may be different than yours. I may be a bit further ahead of you on the path, but I still got to stretch from where I am. So that's job one, is do the other humans practice the religion of transformation, if you want to call it that? That's job one. Job two is, what is the space itself like? Because I do think space contributes, the actual physical space, the physicality of the space contributes to transformation. You know, there are places out in nature where, you know, you get great contribution. And then, you know, if we were trying to do I group sitting around a conference table, you know, in somebody's office, I don't know how much transformation can happen in a space like that. Not that zero happens, but I think, again, when you have anything that is in the space that is basically taking away from the possibility of those portal opening or distracting. Here's why the distraction thing is so crucial with I group space. We as men, we know this about ourselves. We will use any excuse possible. And I know I did for 30-something, 50-something years, any excuse possible not to do the grunt work of transformation, not to face this truth, not to start to wrestle that bear to the ground and to start out on this new path. We will use any excuse. It could be somebody who's not informed, you know, not in the I group, passing by the room. It could be there's a dog in the room. It could be there's some music of a lawnmower in the neighborhood or something. All of those things men will use to go, you know, that doesn't feel too safe here. So boom, all of a sudden we shrink what we're willing to do. And so that's, again, we're back to that place of courage that says we do this work in a lot of different places, and we have to be willing to push through sometimes if the physical space itself is working against us a little bit because there is a noise that we can't get rid of or something like that.
I hope you're enjoying the Mankind podcast. The Mankind Project supports all kinds of men with men's groups and programs aimed at building self-awareness, improving relationships, and upping your game. If you're willing to take the next step and you're a man of color, check out the men's work for BIPOC men. Find out more in the show notes.
And we do that by the men fortifying, the same thing we do on the wall. What we do on the wall when we do that well is and I get that we've by and large gotten away from the black clothing and all that in a lot of places, but what we're trying to do is build a physical, energetic wall to contain that space for those men on the floor. And I group is the same way. So that means several things if I'm in that I group. It means I have to show up. I have to bring all of me to the table, so there can't be any part of my mind and consciousness wandering about out of I group and other stuff and work and all of that kind of stuff. I have to bring all of that. I have to stay in contact with that man at the relational level. So as he's struggling to figure out, what he's going to do, and he can kind of see that possible new path opening up and see the pain of the old path, I need to be in deep and abiding, even in my silence, relationship with him. Because what I'm trying to get him to understand is you're not alone. As you kind of go inside into the mystery of change and transformation, you're not alone. I'll be there with you energetically. And that's my job, is to be a guardian for you and to accompany you and to let you know that you're not alone here in this space. So it takes men being fully present to offset what the physical space lacks. We can't always be in the most ideal physical space to do I group. And if we can't, then the men have to fortify that with their own energies, which means I got to know what the fuck that means. What does it mean for me to be so grounded as I'm sitting there listening to this man start to set up his work round? What does it mean to be so grounded that I just, boom, I pop out this wall of energy on my side that I can connect to the next man, and we start kind of surrounding that. Plus, as the man goes into this place of transformation, we want our energy to block any and all other distractions that are trying to get in there and keep him on the same path. And so that takes a bit of work, just to understand that place that says, I can't afford to fuck around in my group. I have to be here, be all in all the time. And I have to understand, what does that energetic manipulation feel like inside of me when I bring it as part of building a container with these other 6 men in the group to seal this thing off now, so that Tom has the most powerful container there in front of him to look at those windows of transformation more clearly and to really address those questions. Do I want to continue down that old path, or am I truly ready to transform myself? So
in the iGroup leadership training, you talk about self-management as one of the cores to creating that. So I know I can get into my own head when I am facilitating a piece of work if I see some aspect of that man's path is similar to mine right now, or he's stuck in a similar place to me. Talk a little bit about self-management.
Well, the beauty of transformation, and I think facilitation, is this. When we've done enough of our own work, and if we've regrounded the stories, all of the stories that contain all of those paths that have pain and less than, thriving on them, and when we've grounded those inside of us differently, we can actually feel the warmth of that new place where we've synthesized all that in the wisdom, and that warmth becomes part of what we can bring to the next man when we're facilitating him without trying to control him or inject our story. To the extent that I still got a bunch of unhealed shit inside of me, that stuff is going to poke up and try to say, well, here's what you ought to be doing. Here's what's going on. I can tell you what's going on with this guy. It's the same thing that happened to you. And boom, all of a sudden we're in this kind of projection of facilitation, rather than a place where what we're drawn from our own past is that synthesized wisdom that we can imbue in our words and our actions and our creativity and intuition as we work with this man. And that takes some work. And again, not everybody is going to have all their work done, right? That's why they're in iGroup. They're still working on themselves. But to the extent possible, we need men to really manage their own stuff when this is going on, and to recognize and to use their breathing and to recognize that they got to keep recentering anytime another man's work activates them in a way that'll set them up to operate from a projected space rather than truly a facilitating space. And that can happen, right? Because our work is not, our lives sometimes are not so dissimilar with the dads and the moms and the neighborhoods and the countries and all that stuff that happens to us growing up. So
Beautiful.
That's the self-management piece to me.
An image that just popped into my head as you were speaking is that what we're drawing from, Sam Keen, thank you, is a fire in the belly of our the places where we have transformed ourselves rather than the static.
Exactly.
Because when I facilitate from the static, not so good.
And when we can be in touch with that, what we sense, Boyson, is what we sense in that is, I see the places where I thought the old path was attractive and I didn't want to go down in the new path and do all that hard work and shift and evolve all these things inside of me to create a new me. I see the place where I did create a new me and how that has blessed my life with new choices and healthier relationships and all of that stuff. And so when we can feel all of that as facilitated, where we feel that combination of, I know what it's like to still suffer, and because I still got a few places that I haven't had courage to actually work on. I can actually use that as part of this facilitation to help me have empathy and compassion for this man so that I don't judge him, right? And so that I don't try to fix him, because I remember my own suffering of places where I didn't choose the new path, or I still haven't. I still have work to do. But if we've all had some successes in evolving some parts, I also want to bring the gold that is part of that. I want the man to feel that there is this place where you can hope for something different. I can't input hope into him, right? I have no capacity to do that, but I can show him in how I'm working with him what hope feels like by asking the questions that I need to ask to let him see that is hope in fact what he wants? Is that new path, even though it's largely unknown, he's got a lot of work to do, but does hope sound appealing at all to him? So I've got to manage my own stuff so that it just doesn't kind of start flaring out right in the middle of me facilitating that other man. That's the self-management stuff.
What hope feels like. Thank you, Thomas Griggs. There's some really juicy stuff in the chat that's going on. I want to bring one out from Ali just to see how it resonates with you. He asked about the distinction between spirit, heart, and soul. Can you draw those out a little bit? I have an image in my mind and I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I don't know that mine is useful to anything else. I came into this work really cognitive. I had learned to depend fully on my Spockian brain to have success in life, and so consequently had success in a lot of levels, screwing up a lot of things. And so I just put out the caveat. I had to get some of this jargon to make sense to me before I could even go forward and have any hope. And spirit and soul was one of those places. So I like what I begin to see. I don't even remember the author anymore, but some of the work of, for me, spirit is the highest places we aspire to, whether that is in how we connect with this community, if it's a community of I group folks, if it's a community of LKS folk, whatever it is, it's that place that we aspire to, that community being at its best for all concerned. And I think also from that place where we aspire to connect with other things that are much, much bigger than us.
Thank you.
I'm an atheist. I'm an anti-theist. And so I don't believe in gods and things like that. But I do believe in things that are greater than us, like compassion, like respect, like understanding, like a deep and fierce curiosity with this man. I believe in those kind of things. And so a spirit is the part that carries all of those things that are bigger than me, that I also want to be part of my I group experience and how I facilitate.
Thank you.
I think soul is the place where we carry kind of the beat down of this human life, right? And so it's that place of the downward, whoever it was that said, the path of soul is downward and crooked. I've always liked that the path of soul is downward and crooked. It's that place where we have this aspiration, which I think is at a super high level when we're in babies and adolescent, that first 10 years. But then we kind of get all the whacks from life, a lot of us in those first 10 years, where the parents aren't quite as healthy as they need to be, and other things like that. And the stuff happens, and boom, 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 we got this place where we're starting to also carry, in addition to what I still hope for and aspire to, I'm also carrying the fact that sometimes this life thing is kind of hard on me here. And it creates all these feelings that are uncomfortable for me and distressing to me too, based on the experiences in some of these places in my life. And so to me, it's that place, is how do we still have what I call the purity of aspirational and great hope for ourselves and others and our communities and our families and all that. And then how do we still recognize that part of what makes me me is I have to honor the place of the soul, where I carry the most human part of that journey, even with all of those feelings and stuff that don't work for me, all of those choices I made that didn't serve me, all that stuff. My job is to turn all of that stuff in the soul. I don't think it's just to carry it as experiences. My job is to synthesize all that stuff in the wisdom so it serves the spiritual path. To take all those experiences and all those feelings, and with something like iGroups and my check-ins and the work that I do is to synthesize that stuff of the soul into wisdom that serves me in the journey of the spirit and the spiritual. So the spiritual is relational stuff, right? It's all that relational stuff. So does that help a little bit? That's my crazy definition of it.
Beautiful. And then I'm going to just place heart in the body, right? Our emotive life, what emerges from our hearts.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I look at heart space as that place of kind of what is all of the emotional foundation that I'm using to underpin all of the relational. And so if the spiritual is the relational, it's got to be underpinned by something. And to me, it's the heart space of what's the emotional.
Thank you.
And so again, in Guy Group, that place where, if you've heard those old iGroup protocols I did, I brought in a couple of words that I think are still useful. And that was the words that we have to have emotional literacy and we have to have emotional fluency in iGroup. That's two of the things we got to broaden and deepen our path. We can't just operate from 6 feelings. That's the part of warriors I always hated, is like, there's only 6 feelings you need to focus on. It's like bullshit. But those 6 are core, and I still teach them as core. Start there. But I have to have some additional flavors and shades of gray to actually express some of that stuff of that soulful and spiritual journey. And so iGroup should be about, and I would want it to still be about men also understanding, getting greater flexibility in their heart space to operate across a wider spectrum of emotions and feelings as they connect with themselves and others.
Charlie just asked, is literacy necessary for fluency?
That's a good question. The answer is yes. I mean, I think I have to understand, so let's take something like, fear. So if you look at the synonyms for fear can run the gamut from, and by the way, in Jim Mitchell world, fear just means something is challenging me and I need to respond to that challenge. And so that can run the gamut from a mild challenge, so something like nervous or anxious or concerned, to kind of a medium kind of challenge, like I was scared by something, to a very intense kind of challenge, words like panic and terrorized. So I do think that sometimes as we're trying to understand ourselves, while I know that I'm in the fear quadrant with this thing in my life, it helps also that I understand which flavor of gray is it? Is it okay just to say, that I'm scared about this? Absolutely. But sometimes the thing is that I'm scared or I have fear about this is really that I'm anxious about it and I have this anxiety that bothers me. And that has a different intonation of what that thing is doing to me. If you think about what feelings are trying to tell us, period, feelings are trying to tell us about how the events of my life and relationships are impacting me. Feeling is really an impact statement. That's all it is. Mom fell down, she tripped and fell down, and that's the thing that happened. I feel sad and scared for her, and I'm anxious about wanting, that's me telling you how that impacted me. I think as we talk about that impact of the events of our lives, it does help to have a bit more literacy, so to know more feelings, and also to be able to kind of dance with them a bit more, rather than I'm just going to throw everything under the big bold title of fear. But sometimes the fear, sometimes sadness is disappointment. And if you think about it, if I'm talking about sadness, I can say that I feel sad about something, but when I say I feel disappointed by this thing, you get that additional layer that comes from that word disappointment. And so I think it does matter. Fluency, fluidity, and also literacy. I think it matters in men. I think it matters in humans.
We're getting to 50 minutes after the hour. So I'm going to go to a couple of your trademarks here, Jim, to have you define a couple more things. RTRS. What is RTRS?
That's a word that's an acronym that I coined for the work that I do in organizations and with leaders and stuff. Basically, it means real talk about real shit. And here's what real talk about real shit is. That's when somebody wants to talk to me. So an I group, or some of them, even on the couch with my honeys and my kids and all that, and my brother, real talk about real shit means two things to me. One, I have some feelings about this thing I want to talk to you about. And two, it matters to me. Now, when you have real talk going on, it's really important in I group and in other places in our lives not to do what I call stupid shit. Another thing that I coined. So stupid shit is when somebody's trying to talk to me about that thing that they have some feelings about and it matters to them. Stupid shit would be things like I interrupt, I fix, I offer unsolicited advice, I argue data with them, I listen to be right, I minimize, I trivialize, I can give you a dozen more words. All of those things basically shut down real talk. So I'm starting to unzip that armor and take a little bit of risk with you to have some real talk with you, Informant. When you do stupid shit, it hits my danger. This is not safe part of the brain. And the brain says immediately shut down vulnerability and authenticity. So get back to where it feels comfortable. And for some of us, that's like getting back to none. And so anytime you do stupid shit when people are trying to have real talk with you in an I group or in life, you're going to shut down that person's willingness to be vulnerable with you and willingness to be authentic with you at the deepest levels that they can. Because now they're thinking more about their emotional and spiritual safety in your presence. And I had to learn that one because I had a PhD in all of the things called stupid shit that I would do to people. And I would feel justified in doing that, of correcting their data. The car was blue. No, the car's gray, actually. That's not even what the fucking conversation is about, but I'm just going to argue that data point with them. That kind of stuff, or minimizing, you know what, Boyson, it's not that big of a deal, that kind of stuff. Trying to cheer them up, Tom, it's not that bad, you'll have another chance at another job later, that kind of stuff. Sometimes, I think one of our big jobs of understanding in I group is we have to know how to just hold that space for a man to move fully into that stuff and to let him begin to resolve it with his inner tools without us screwing the space up by doing stupid shit. Because the minute I tell you, that's not a big a deal, well, you got feelings about it, and it's a big deal to you. And so for me to sweep that off the table is unimportant. You should not care about that. It's like, really? So to me, those are acts of disrespect when we do that sometimes, where we do stupid shit in the middle of somebody trying to have real talk with us. It's not easy for us as men to do real talk about real shit. Even in Warriors, it's not easy. Our struggle and our work in Warriors is always continuing to just open that channel up to get to those feelings in that heart space faster and faster and faster, and actually understand those feelings and talk about them in a way that others can understand how life impacts me and have some ownership for those feelings. So real talk about real shit. You should put my trademark on that, by the way. So, RTRS. And on the stupid shit. Don't do stupid shit.
Trademark Jim Mitchell. So you're sitting with a group of about 80 guys who are I group reps and I group leaders in their communities.
Okay.
You've given us a whole bunch of stuff about what is transformation, creating transformative space, some keys about not getting in the way of creating transformative space.
Right.
What is your aspiration for where we're headed as an organization?
Well, I mean, I'm aware right now that we're kind of having some chickens have come home to roost from the standpoint of how we source the weekend. And I'm in regular contact with Tosi and other people who were, part of the 80s or part of the organization. And I do think that this is a place where we got to look closely at who we want to be and how we want to be in the world in a way that does not impact and does not create all of this noise in the environment. And so my great hope is that men are in those conversations with big hearts, but also a willingness to change. Because the reality is, there's probably super creative men in this room here. I know a bunch of them all over the world in Warriors where we could sit down and in 10 days build out a new weekend that would transform men's life, and it would contain none of the current stuff that we have. So it's not like we found the one true magical thing when we found What's at Risk or when we found Cop Talk or whatever. There are other ways to get to those transformations. And my one is that we just be creative, that we own up to kind of any harm that we've caused, and that we look forward from a place of saying this work is still necessary. And you know what, we can rebuild this thing from the ground up and still have one of the most powerful training for men on the planet. I mean, I had to figure that out as I work with, one of my customers is mostly, senior level executives, CEOs and presidents of large, prosperous organizations. And I had to figure out, how do you go in a room like that and have transformation? And so we're creative little beast here in this organization. We'll figure this out, but we've got to kind of keep looking forward. That one, the work has to be there for men. There is no good substitute that I know of. And two, it doesn't have to look anything like it looks like today. I would say that.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.